Okay, we're going to get started now. So today we're going to cover the second law of leadership. And this is, last time we talked about the law of the lid. And the law of the lid is critical because it tells you that your limits of effectiveness of how much you're going to get done in the world, how much of a difference you're going to make, is actually really an expression of the limit of your leadership. So if you can imagine that if I wanted to, I don't know, make vaccines, right? And I was in my lab and I was making vaccines. Well, I might be able to make 1 dose, 10 dose, 20 doses a day. But if I wanted to make 100 million doses, there's no way I could get that done in my entire lifetime if I was just doing it by myself. In order for me to get, the number of vaccines we need to help really cure the disease, I'm going to need a big team, and I'm going to need to organize that big team, and I need to inspire that team to want to work with me and follow along in this mission of curing the disease. And so it's important for us as people, if we're going to make a bigger impact in the world, if we're going to be really powerful, to learn leadership so that we can achieve all the goals we want to achieve without limitation. So I'm going to take you through, I'm going to share my screen here for a second so that you guys can see my share screen, bang, voila. So the law of influence is the second law, and what it says is, so in the first law we're on, hey, leadership is important. You're not going to really make a difference without it. That's the law of the lid says. And the second law, the law of influence, is saying, okay, so we need this leadership thing. What is it? And so what John Maxwell is saying, and I love this, it's the simplest, most effective definition of leadership ever said. The true measure of leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So when you influence somebody, that's what it means to be a leader. So what does influence mean? Influence means when you affect them. Influence is a particular way of affecting people that is slow and by being a strong example. And we'll talk a little bit more about 7 ways that John Maxwell lays out that people who emerge as influential leaders, people who have influence, do that. Number one, it's about your integrity. It's about the character. It's about who you are. So if we look at Sensei Janice as an example here, and we'll look at 2 world leader examples in a minute, but Sensei Janice is kind and caring, and just who she is inspires people, to here at the dojo and at church and at school, to engage with her and to feel like she cares about them, and that makes a difference. And number 2 is relationships. Who do you know? So it's like, hey, if you look at a famous musician right now, Hozier. Is Hozier maybe the best musician to come out in the last few years? Well, maybe, but maybe not, right? There might be guy who's just as good, but didn't know the agent that Hozier knew or something like that. I don't know anything about that particular artist, but this happens all the time. Sometimes you'll become more influential because you're connected with the right people. And we'll talk more about that later in the book about, how do we create and establish these connections? And also, how strong are those relationships, right? Another reason people become influential is because of the knowledge they have, So if we look at Anthony Fauci, the director of pandemic response right now in 2021 now, his particular knowledge has given him influence, right? Whereas maybe 3 years ago, somebody with his knowledge would have influence, but now, because he knows what the world needs to know, he's really in a position to really tremendous amount of influence and really change basically how all of America is operating, right? Intuition, what they feel. So people can be influential because they kind of understand, other people, because they kind of get it, because they make the right guess about what people want. So Steve Jobs, the guy who invented Apple computers, he just had a good instinct to know, like, okay, here's something that people are going to want. They don't even know they want yet. but also your best friend who kind of can feel like, yeah, well, something's not right with you today. What's going on? Talk to me. Or they may just pat you on the back or spend a little extra time or pick up the phone and call you and check up on you. That ability to have intuition, to know what people are feeling, um, that that's huge. Experience is the fifth way John Maxwell lists. And um, if you're a general who's fought in a few wars, well, guess what? That puts you in a position of influence because people are going to look for your knowledge, they're going to look for your intuition, they're going to look for your expertise in things. And also, I mean, that also plays in, like I said about those other ones, but also plays into your intuition. You have this informed intuition. It's also going to play into the relationships. You've met people along that path, along the way. So, sometimes kids, I think, you may not feel like you have a lot of influence on the world yet, and to some degree, that's true, right? You're building that because you don't know as much as you will later. Your feelings and your intuition about how to deal with those feelings, they're growing. You're still building more and more friendships and more relationships, but you don't want to wait until you have all that in place before you start to practice your leadership, right? You can practice that now, and as that grows, your leadership will grow along with it. Past success. Hey, look, if you are a track and field runner and you've lost every race you've ever run, the chances that you have a lot of influence in the track and field business are pretty small, right? But if you have won 2 gold medals in track and field, well, guess what? A lot of people are going to be paying attention to what you have to say. Even if the guy who lost races actually knows a tremendous amount about races, there are people out there who cannot perform really well, but who know and understand a sport. Sports are filled with those people. But hey, winning a couple of gold medals, it definitely gets people's attention, right? It's definitely going to allow you to influence people in a way that just having read the right book and having some great ideas will not. So past successes make a difference, and also that ability. Can you do it? That makes a difference. And you can see that along these 7 things: character, relationships, knowledge, intuition, experience, past success, and ability. They aren't independent. They work together, right? Does your knowledge affect your ability? Does your past successes, is that because you have ability or experience? Yeah, of course it is, right? So let's take a look at two examples from the world. They're actually 2 really wonderful examples of human beings. I clicked the button and nothing happened. Let's try again. Ta-da, it worked. So who are Princess Diana, Lady Di, and Mother Teresa? So here they are. There's these 2 famous women on the cover of Time magazine, which is a world famous magazine. And you can see on one side we have this young, beautiful woman, and on this other side we have this older looking lady in a habit. That's what that outfit is called. With the blue and the white there. It comes different things. And it says living saints underneath her because she was literally called a saint by the Catholic religion. So let's talk about these 2 people. So one is truly a princess, right? Like, wow, do you think that being a princess helped her have influence? The fact that she was like the Princess of England? Well, of course it did, right? She got invited to a lot of important parties and got to meet a lot of important people because she had that position, right? But that really wasn't it. She didn't start out as a princess. She wasn't born royal. She was born as just a school teacher, just teaching regular school. And just something about her personality captured the prince's attention, and her kindness, her sweetness, her intelligence, all those things led her to become a real live bona fide princess, right? And so what she could have done with that princess life is gone to all the parties, been at the fancy restaurants, gotten telephone ring over their call. So I'm just gonna wait because I don't know how to shut off the radio. Okay, so what you could have done is hung out at the the castle or the palace, I mean, and gone to the parties, gone to the fancy yachts, sat there and had a really comfortable life, doing comfortable things because hey, she's a princess, right? She gets to do those things, but that's not what she chose to do with the influence that she got through her marriage. Instead, she chose to fight for people who had some really rough lives, so people who had a disease called leprosy or lepers. And all over the world in different parts, the disease is very contagious, and people who have this disease are treated like they're they're cast away and they're put away. So they're not only dying from a very difficult disease, they're also treated like, you're dirty or something wrong with you. You're gross in a lot of places, and that's not really fair or true. They just caught an illness that's contagious, so you have to be careful when you're around them. And it's kind of a difficult disease, but they're still people worthy of respect and dignity. And in most places in the world, they weren't receiving that. And so she fought for their rights and for the rights of people who have HIV and AIDS. And back when she was doing that in the 80s and 90s, I don't think that people who had those diseases they were treated like, oh, it's your fault, you got this disease or something wrong with you. It's similar in some ways. We've come a long way with that, but her work with them, such a high profile person being willing to take on a disease like that was really remarkable and showed what kind of heart she had and made a big difference for people. So then, another important thing she did is that landmines are bombs that you plant in the ground, right? And so if I knew that, like, the enemy was going to come roll a whole bunch of tanks, down this road tomorrow, I could stay there and fight the tanks, which would be dangerous, right? Or I could leave some bombs on the ground, and then when the tanks came over the roads, the bombs would go off and blow up the tanks, and so that's safer for me if I have these mines. So it's kind of a neat way to fight a war, neat in the sense that I don't have to be there to fight. Yeah, here's the problem. What if it's not a tank that comes down that road? What if it's, some family in their pickup truck? They could get hurt. Or what if the war's over and you don't dig them all up, because you left some behind, right? Maybe you didn't put them on a road, you put them on a field. And so what was happening all over the world is these mines were used in all sorts of places, and kids were stepping on them and getting hurt. And innocent people, 5 years after the war was over, would go to some place that no one had been in a while, and all of a sudden, bang, they get blown up. And she decided, look, there's no reason to be using these kinds of weapons that hurt innocent people like this. If you're not going to be there to see what's going on, don't use the wars, and don't use them in wars. And so she got them banned so that countries don't use them anymore, or most countries don't use them anymore. It's pretty remarkable. You think about, like, what could she be doing as a princess? Would it be more fun to do something other than ban landmines? Well, probably, right? That probably, you have to look at a lot of bad things and think about some really tough situations. And like, oh my gosh, if I do this, if we use landmines, I might save some soldiers' lives, but it might cost a kid life later. Those are tough decisions. And she took on some really hard, difficult things as a princess, as a school teacher turned princess. And she still went to the parties and still got to do those other things. But that's not where she put her focus. And I think a lot of people admire her and love her for that, because she was about protecting and helping people. And ultimately, she won, like, sort of the biggest prize you can get for showing respect for people on the planet, and that's the Nobel Peace Prize. Okay, so let's go to the other side. And by the way, I'll just say this. Princess Diana, while in many ways is kind of like a perfect role model, something like a Disney story, right? She wasn't a perfect person. There are all sorts of issues that she had. I don't want to, say anything bad about her right here, but if you read her biography or something like that, you're going to find out, look, even though she did all this great stuff, she wasn't perfect. But you don't have to be perfect to have influence. You don't have to be thinking yourself like, oh my gosh, what? No one's going to follow me because sometimes that can be rude, or because I'm not disciplined enough to control my weight, and you know what, those things may be a factor, but they're not the factor. The 7 things we talked about earlier, those are a factor, right? So Mother Teresa, on the other hand, she didn't start out wealthy, and never really became wealthy. She was a Catholic woman, and she didn't start out, certainly wasn't a princess for sure, right? And she also saw the plight of these people who had this disease of leprosy, and particularly in South Asia and India. She saw that they just didn't have the capacity, to deal with people with the disease. So they sent them to these like special places where they would go to suffer and for the rest of their life and die. And it was a very tough situation to walk in and see all these sick people who hadn't done anything wrong. They just happened to catch this tough disease, and they're living these very sad lives, in this difficult situation. And so she could have done all sorts of things as a nun, but what she chose to do was to help these people, to go into some of the most difficult, uncomfortable situations. Not a lot of, sometimes there's not enough food, and not running water or plumbing. Maybe it's smelly or dirty or dangerous for her because she's surrounded by people who have an infectious disease. And yet she spent her life doing that and bringing, saying, hey, you know what, even though you're sick, God still loves you. Even though you're sick, we're going to take care of you. You're a worthy human being. You're worthy of my love. You're worthy of God's love. And I think that was very inspiring for people to see someone take such big risks. And she worked tirelessly against abortion, which she also felt was wrong and was taking advantage of innocent people. And people have different opinions about that, but the bottom line is you can't really question her heart about her intentions and where she was coming from, because of the kind of person she was. And I think her experience with leprosy and other things really led her to talk about, hey, when people are sick and dying, we need to still honor them as people. We need to still take care of them as human beings. And what you can see from the pictures when we first started this out, hey, here's a princess, here's this wrinkly old nun looking person. How can they both have the same amount of influence? One's this famous star, and one's living in a small camp in India, but they both changed the world with who they were. They both changed their world with who they became and who they helped. They both influenced many, many people, not just the people they helped directly, not just the kids who didn't get hurt with the landmines, the people who had this disease, leprosy, but they inspired other people to, like, this is what kindness could look like. This is how we can change the world. Hey, just a common nun or a common school teacher can rise up and really change the world in a profound way. And all it takes is for you to be in a position where you can influence many people. And ultimately, Mother Teresa was also given the Nobel Peace Prize. So even though they have very different kind of lives, they had a very similar impact on the world. And so I think they're great examples about that. So I want to talk about one last thing today, which is that you can affect somebody by manipulating them, right? And I want to talk about how influence and manipulation are different, right? So if I say to you, hey, I think, like our student Shannon did this great drive where she's collecting toys to give to the fire department. So when they go to a fire call and there's a scared kid there, they get a toy, right? So she's asking people, hey, can you donate some toys so we can give them to the firemen, so that when they go to a house that they have something to give the kids to make them feel safer. What a great idea, right? Isn't that kind? Isn't that sweet? And that's something a kid is doing, right? They're like 9 years old. That's a great thing to do. That's a great influence. It kind of inspires me, I hope it inspires you to think, wow. And, they've been on TV and news, and people are hearing about it, and I'm sure lots of people are inspired by what they're hearing. But imagine if she forced them to give the toys. Went into their house with a gun or a sword and said, "Give me your toys, or we're going to kill you." Or like, oh, you know what? you have a lot more toys than that kid, so you don't really need them. What's wrong with you? Why are you keeping all those toys? And rather than threatening them with force, but threaten them with like feeling like a jerk for not, giving toys. She'd probably get results either way, like saying, hey, let's help people. It's important. I think, imagine this scared child and how much it would mean to them to have a toy, or, give me that, or I'm gonna shoot you, or give me that, or I'm gonna make you feel like a jerk. Um, both would be effective in getting toys, right? But really, one is about influence. It's about getting people to join your cause because they see for themselves why it's important. They choose on their own accord based on who you are, based on who you're being, based on what you bring to the table, um, not based on what you're going to do to them, what the consequence is going to be if they don't. And that's one of the differences between influence and manipulation. It's a little bit like a soft touch kind of thing. I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to try and make you. So, um, if you're a parent listening to this, try and look at your parenting this week. Where could you use influence instead of manipulation? Okay, sometimes manipulation is important. If I'm a police officer and I want someone to put down their gun, um, it, manipulation might be the better way to go, right? Than trying to influence them. Like, hey, how would you feel if someone pointing a gun at you? Well, that may work, but maybe threatening them, get down on the ground right now. I don't want to shoot you. That's more like manipulation, right? But it may be necessary. As parents, sometimes we're doing that too. But you know what? I think in the long term, influence is usually a better strategy, or always a better strategy. And if you're a child, try and look at how your parents are trying to influence you and how you're influencing your friends and your brothers and sisters. Like, what are you bringing to the table there that makes a difference for them? And so that's where I want to leave today. And I want to remind you that last week we gave you an assignment about going and finding somebody who's a leader in your life, someone who you think has had an influence on you, someone who you think changes people's lives, and do those interview questions. If you didn't catch them, check the last video. I put them up there, take a screenshot, and get that information. So that's it for today. We got a chance to talk extensively about the law of influence. We're not done with that law because I think, like I said last time, if you understand the law of the lid, why leadership is important, and the law of influence, what leadership is, then we can really take this very far. So, hey, thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next time.